Great.
Okay, well, hello everyone. My name is Ash. I'm one of the pastors at City Church Bristol, and today I'm having a cup of tea with a good friend of mine, which is an absolute delight. And I thought, actually, rather than just the two of us having a cup of tea, I thought, well, you could all join us, actually. So if you don't have a cup of tea or coffee or hot chocolate or whatever to hand, feel free to hit the pause button, grab yourself a brew, come back and join us. I'm sure we're going to have a good time together now. So my friend here is Lydia. Now, I've known Lydia for a number of years. Wow, it's been a few years now. Goodness, it was 25 years. Wowzers! Wow, I'm starting to feel a little bit old. It's been 5 years, and there are loads of ways that I could describe Lydia. But she is wise, she is humble, and she is godly. And we used to work together in London. We used to work with UCCF, helping students to read the Bible, understand the Bible, and get to know Jesus a little bit better. And it was honestly fantastic time working with Lydia. And I was supervising her, but in reality, I feel like I kind of got the better end of the deal. I learned loads. And that's part of the reason, actually, why I wanted you guys to get to know her a little bit better. Most of you who are part of City Church will know that I do not live in London anymore. I'm now in Bristol. Lydia is also no longer in London. She is elsewhere. So Lydia, just be helpful for us to hear kind of where are you in the world? What does life look like for you now? What are your passions? What do you give most of your time to?
So I'm in Newcastle upon Tyne, which is up in the northeast, hence why I have a hat on, because it's a lot colder up here than down south. I've got my hot water bottle as well.
Amazing.
And I guess my life has lots of different aspects, but I spend majority of my time working as program manager of Shieldfield Artworks, which is an art gallery or an art project run by the Methodist Church. And we look at how art, faith and community work together, and how you can engage and be part of a community in a creative way, and how that fits into our faith. So I do that 3 days a week. And then I'm also an artist, and in my art practice, I look at how we embody hospitality. And currently not during lockdown, because it's impossible to do during lockdown, but usually that looks like hosting meals in a big tent, which actually is the same, got the same like fabric as these prints here. I printed the fabric, and within those meals we discuss what hospitality looks like and what it means and its history, and how those can range from Christian conversations with Christian people, or just general conversations with people trying to drill down to what that means. I like cooking a lot, as do you, I know. I just love thinking about things and being creative in the way that I am around people and host people, and I think that would surmise what I do and who I am.
That is a helpful summary. Thank you so much, Lydia. And maybe we'll get a chance to kind of dig into that a little bit more as we go on with the conversation. Now you've already talked about hospitality. So really, today that's kind of our focus, or our theme is hospitality. Now it's a word that's commonly used in church circles. Hospitality is an industry that I used to work in, hospitality. But it just might be helpful for us to think about what it actually means. So could you maybe just help us to navigate, when you say hospitality, what exactly do you mean?
Well, I think I kind of want to tackle some misnomers first. So often when we hear the word hospitality, we think entertainment. I'm going to invite someone to my home and I'm going to put on a really nice dinner, which is not a bad thing, but it has to be this perfect event. Or we think of the hospitality industry, which is more of a I'll pay money to get a service kind of thing. But I think what I see hospitality is a much broader sense than that, and it's the way that we share our lives and give our lives as a whole to people. And I've read quite a lot of books, but one of the most interesting things I've read was about this idea of making room for other people in our lives. And we see that in making room around the dinner table, or making physical space for people to come and be in. But also, what does that look like with making room in our busyness, in our emotions, in our thoughts, in our spiritual walk with God? What does that look like? And I think I can talk a bit later more about what hospitality looks like with regards to theology and faith. But because we have a God who is hospitality in essence, that's kind of where my base comes from. That, and he created a spacious, spacious, gracious space. He created the world and he made room for us to be in that. And he also made room for us to have a bit of agency in creating that with him, in naming the animals and developing and flourishing the garden. And then we also see how he makes room in relationship, and allows us to be in relationship with him. So I think when you automatically think about hospitality, kind of need to break down those preconceptions and have a much broader idea of what that looks like.
That's really, I think what you've described there is actually really, really holistic, and it's almost all-encompassing. It's a completely different way of looking at hospitality, and you've touched on God in the midst of that, and God and I suppose the nature of God being a foundation for hospitality. I wonder, you're a Christian, you're a follower of Jesus, and I know you as someone who over the years has really engaged with theology as well as art and creativity and hospitality. Is there anything like distinctly Christian about your approach to hospitality? I suppose what I'm asking is how does your view of God shape the way that you approach hospitality?
In lots of ways. I think, first of all, I think there's this idea, well, God as a host, and he's also a guest in many ways, but he's so generous, and he does that out of self-giving hospitality. So a lot of the time, when I invite people into my home, or at work where we're kind of inviting people into the gallery, my motives are always mixed. I want people to see me as a great cook, a great host, and often I want reciprocity. I would love to be invited back to someone's house for dinner. But I think trying to see it not in that way, but to see it as a generous giving of myself, not expecting anything back. And actually that feels a lot more like it's imaging the way that God does hospitality. Like even on the cross, for example, Jesus has enabled us to come back into God's presence. So he's enabled us to come, he's made room for us in God's presence. And he says, like, this is the only way back. I'm not asking you for anything here apart from believing in me. And that's the ultimate form of hospitality, I think. It's generous, but it's also really costly. And so when we're thinking about how we are hospitable to people, if we think about that in a reciprocity way of, I'm going to give this so I can get something back, that's definitely not what God does. And yeah, I think it's important for us to be hospitable without expecting a return, and to also be hospitable in a costly manner.
Yes.
Um, and to think, actually, how do we do that in our lives? No matter whether I'm a student who um, hasn't got much money and don't own my own space, or I'm a full-time mum with 4 kids and um, I have a big house, or whatever context you're in, thinking through, actually, how am I hospitable in what God has given me here?
Yeah.
And am I okay with it, with the fact that that might be costly? And how am I being generous with what God has given me? I think there's that, and there's also the aspect of, in its history, hospitality. Well, the meaning of the word comes from this word hospice. I pronounced that incorrectly. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's Latin, and it means guest and host, but it also then backtracks to something called hostis, which means stranger or enemy. And so in the root of the word hospitality is making room for the stranger. And that's exactly what God does for us. We have been, we were, what's the word I'm looking for? Like we were cut off and we were strangers, alienated from God. And he made room for us to come back. And so when I think about that, also how am I hospitable to strangers in my life? When we're from a young age, we're like stranger danger, shouldn't be strangers. But actually, who is the stranger in my life? Who is the person that I am either alienated from, or I don't know, or who is different from me? Because also when you see Jesus in the Gospels, Tim Chester once said, Jesus is either going to a meal, at a meal, or coming from meal. And all of those meals that he is at, he breaks down the societal thinking of, I need to be a host or a guest so I can increase my status. I need to be the most important person in the room. And he said, no, I want to associate with the tax collectors. I want to associate with those who people shun. And so what does that look like? At the moment, do I just invite my friends or the people who I am like from church, or people I'm comfortable with, or am I willing to make room for people who are different from me?
This is really powerful stuff, Lydia. It's I know we've had these conversations over years, but I think just reflecting on it, again, I just think is so significant and so important to be reminded of God's approach to hospitality, and it is often so different to ours. And I think that picture of Jesus in particular, I think is really, really important for us. This thing of him either going to a meal, being at a meal, or coming from a meal, and also who was gathered with him as well. That is a tremendous challenge, but it's a good challenge. And I it's funny, isn't it? Jesus himself, fully God, fully man, the one who created everything, was very happy to be welcomed in by others, and to receive a welcome, a warm welcome by others, which that in of itself is absolutely mind-blowing. So it's like, well, people are welcoming him in, but in reality, in a broader, more significant sense, he is welcoming all sorts in. It does make me think. I know, we have both spent time in each other's homes, and we've eaten and drunk various meals, and cake and coffee and tea, and plenty of that. What I'd love to hear from you, Lydia, is just a little bit about your experience of, I suppose, being a beneficiary of the hospitality of others, and just maybe some of the ways that has shaped you.
Yeah, I have many, many stories, so I'm just going to go on until you stop me. I guess what you were just picking up on was like this idea of the roles of host and guest, and how Jesus is both of those most of the time. And I was thinking about this when I was a relay worker working for UCCF in London. There was one of the students there who I would often invite for dinner or for cake, or I would be the host in that situation. And we had good conversations, but they were never, they never went really deep. And it wasn't until she invited me to her house, where she had the power play in a way. She was comfortable in her space. She was the host. And I remember cycling about half an hour up and down the hills to her house. And I got there absolutely shattered. And it was 7 p.m. So I was like, oh, dinner will be ready. And we went upstairs, and my heart sank when I saw all the ingredients laid out on the side. And she was like, we're going to make lasagna. And I had to ask for a cup of tea. I didn't tell her, because I usually get quite shaky when I'm hungry. I didn't tell her, I just took my cup of tea. But actually, that was such a good experience that she had offered to be host, but she also wanted me to be involved in that. And there was an interplay between host and guest roles there. And as we cooked together, and as she was in her own space, she opened up really deeply, and it was such a good conversation. And I think I was just thinking, often I like to be the host and I like to have people around, but actually when we give that up, and when we take on roles that we're not used to, so even if you're a guest and then you take on a host role, there's a difference in relationship, and that transforms people. And I think you see that in the story of Zacchaeus in the Bible, where Jesus is like, I'm coming to your house for dinner. And he makes Zacchaeus a host, something that he's never been before. And that totally transforms Zacchaeus' heart, and it allows him to welcome people. Like he's never had the opportunity to do that before, and Jesus allows him to do that. So I think that experience of making lasagna and being a guest, but also kind of a host at the same time, make me understand why that's so transforming. What other stories? I think as well, I've spent a bit of time in Charleston, South Carolina, with a community there of, they're all Christian families, and they live on the same street. It's not like a gated community or anything. They're just in a normal housing estate. But their mission is for, so they're all doctors or nurses, someone in that family, in each family is, and their mission is for medical students, kind of like what UCCF kind of does. But I think with regards to hospitality, they had an open door policy there, where you could just turn up and go into the house. And I know in Britain we're just a bit like, oh. But just that idea that they were open, their actual physical space was open.
Okay.
And then from getting to know them, they were, that imaged their openness in conversation, and their openness with sharing their life transparently, and being able to challenge one another, and live through the really dark moments in life, but also the joys in life. And they had students live in house with them. So when I was there, they were just like, this is your bedroom, you're part of the family. And actually living with another family, and I have lived with about 4 other families in my lifetime, and being able to see the parts of life that we show other people when they come round, or on our Instagram accounts or whatever, but also being able to see the parts of life that are messy and are hard. And I think that is really a big aspect of hospitality. It's making room for people to see that, and to know that they can make room in your mess. They can come and be in that. I think that's a big aspect of hospitality.
So I wondered, Lydia, whether So I mean, we've talked about this element of making room, and we've talked a little bit about a dynamic between host and guest, and making room, I suppose, in some of our physical spaces. Now we're at a point in this country where being in one another's homes is not quite like what it was before. Now, I know where you land on this. Clearly, that doesn't mean that hospitality is kind of, there's a pause button on it. Not at all. But I just wondered whether you'd be able to help us just to reflect almost on what hospitality could look like at this time. So I think you did a tremendous job of reminding us that whatever context we're in, there is still a place for us. So whether a single mom or whether you're a student or a chief exec or whatever, hospitality is for all of us. I wondered what you might say hospitality could look like at the moment in a pandemic.
There's lots of different things that I might say. Well, I think in general, having someone in your home is quite can be quite a personal thing. You're letting someone into your space to get to know you. But there's also the aspect of, oh, my home has to be perfect, and I have to present myself really well. And neither of those things are possible at the moment. And so how do we allow people to feel welcome and also make room in our hearts for people outside of our homes? So back in the Old Testament times, they would have had threshold places, because there would have been like 30 people who lived in the same home. So there would always be someone home. But they would have gone out to the marketplace or the town gate in order to meet strangers and in order to meet other people. And I think that's where we are at the moment. We have our threshold places, which are either the parks, or some cafes are open if you want to get takeaway. But you also have your front door. And something that our church is doing at the moment is called Walk with Purpose. And it's this idea that you go and walk to the people who are in your, maybe a mile radius of where you live, who are in church, but also other friends, and go and knock on their door, because generally people are home a lot more at the moment. We're less mobile, and kind of back in Old Testament times where there was always someone home, we're kind of in that situation, even though we are individual families or individual people living in our castles, we are there. And I think just going and knocking on someone's home, they probably will be in, and meeting them on their threshold spaces and just having a chat. And it's those spontaneous moments that I think we don't often get in our general day-to-day, that I think are so beautiful. And they're often the God-given moments when you've got I'm a checklist to-do lady, but when I often notice when somebody interrupts that is a God-given moment to say, Lydia, this is the person I've put in front of you. I want you to make room for them in your schedule, and I want you to open up yourself to them in order that you can show me. And so when people are walking around and knocking on your door, that is a moment that God gives I think God prompts you to be like, okay, make room for this person. They are the person I've placed in front of you. And I think also, as I've been walking, I don't know what it's like in Bristol, but we have a park near us, and I always see somebody I know in that park. And that was never the case before, but it's because, I think people are taking a bit more time out of busyness. And I think this is a really good time to reflect how busyness can often be a barrier to hospitality, and how what has changed in this moment has maybe taken some of that away. And if it's possible to keep that, those aspects of knowing that someone's going to be in, or having spontaneous conversations. I think there's lots of other things as well. So there's this idea called commensality, which means sharing a meal at a common table with someone. And you can't do that at the moment. And my friend actually went into school on Tuesday and they have individual tables taped out 2 meters away.
Wow.
That physically shows what that looks like. But actually we can share a common table. We can call somebody and eat a meal together over the phone. Or
Yeah.
I've jotted down ingredients around a friend's house to make brownies, and I didn't give her the recipe, and I was like, you need to call me in order to make this. And we did. I talked her through how to make it, and she's a friend
Excellent.
who isn't a confident baker, and actually this was, I wanted for her to see that she can do it, and she can offer some kind of food to people, and she's become so much more confident, which has been so lovely to see. So there are lots of things like, and now we're allowed 6 people, obviously socially distanced. I think barbecues or picnics in
Yes.
the park, actually you're in a space that doesn't have power play involved. So you're not in someone's home where they are definitely the host or definitely the guest. You're in a space where you can both interplay between that, and like with your barbecue or your picnic, as long as you're not touching each other, there's a there's a role interchange, and there's a beauty of being able to be a host and a guest at the same time, and it's quite casual, and I think it
Mm.
allows for deeper conversations to happen that usually, or maybe not, would not happen if they were in your space. So I think, yeah, and maybe organizing things like that. What else? Oh, lots of things.
I mean, this is honestly, it's fantastic stuff. It's fantastic stuff, and I think I was just reflecting. We as a family, we're moving house fairly soon, and we're going to be on the doorstep of a park. I mean, literally a stone's throw away. And that was one of my reflections to Jess, was that actually, well, it's like all of a sudden we've got this massive home opened up to us, i.e. the park, to which we can actually start to have dinner again with people. We can connect at that shared table again. So I mean, it sounds like as much as this moment of pandemic is horrendous in loads of ways, there are actually some fantastic opportunities out there, and it does provide us an opportunity to reflect again, to reflect on what is most important. And it takes me back to when we were in London, and I think one of the challenges that we reflected on was how to connect with people, how to build relationship when life is moving at such a crazy pace, almost asking ourselves the question, is it actually possible? And I think, like you've articulated really well, when it is possible, sometimes we are forced to stop or to slow down, but we don't always have to live at 100 miles an hour. I think we can make some choices there. Lydia, this has been fantastic. And this is part of the reason why I wanted to invite others into our virtual shared table, because it's just tremendously helpful for us to reflect on this stuff. So thank you so much. Really do appreciate that. There's plenty of us to think about, to reflect on, to live out. I love that idea of a walk of purpose. I think that's the kind of thing that many of us could do. If anyone's passing by my house and feels like they want to drop off some cookies, then absolutely feel free. There'll be no qualms here. Guys, it's been fantastic to be with you for CityDaily. We're going to be back same time tomorrow, but it's a goodbye from me, and it's a goodbye from...
Bye.
See you guys.